what's so beautiful about listening to people like Daniel Schmachtenberger is that you really feel that his sense-making is in service of a certain kind of meaning-making. It's almost that his sense-making is an expression of a certain kind of perspective, a meaningful perspective. What we're doing in the framework of the integral existentialism is about addressing the meaning crisis as it is part of the larger meta-crisis. The hypothesis of the integral existentialism is that the way through the meaning crisis is to reconnect to being. So today we will continue our discussion about sense-making and meaning-making, and we will continue our discussion about Daniel Schmachtenberger's way of doing sense-making and meaning-making. What I said in one of the last lectures where we talked about in what sense meaning-making transcends and includes sense-making is that what's so beautiful about listening to people like Daniel Schmachtenberger is that you really feel that his sense-making is in service of a certain kind of meaning-making. It's almost that his sense-making is an expression of a certain kind of perspective, a meaningful perspective of life, where you're feeling that there's a person that this person is in a connectedness with the world and that he's speaking in resonance with the world. And he every now and then tells a story that what actually initiated his thinking about the state of the world or his reflection upon the world is that he realized that factory farming exists. And so every person at some point realizes that factory farming exists. But Daniel Schmachtenberger was a child who couldn't forget this, who was so deep in connectedness with the world, so that he really had to take it seriously and hold on to that and live his life or organize his life around that, these kinds of realizations. And so it's well worth looking at what he has to say about meaning making. Now, of course, his emphasis is on sense making. But like I said, his sense-making is an expression of his meaning-making. And what we're doing in the framework of the integral existentialism is about addressing the meaning crisis as it is part of the larger meta-crisis, as it is part of the poly-crisis, so the web of the web of interwoven crises that are all happening at the same time. And so it's well worth looking at what Daniel Schmachtenberger has to say about the meaning of life. Now he's asked in this clip that I'm going to show you in a moment. He is asked what the meaningful life is, and so see his answer.
This kind of came to me as a simple way that I kind of relate to it is that a meaningful life involves the mode of being, the mode of doing, and the mode of becoming, and it involves a virtuous relationship between those three.
So I find this distinction very interesting. So a mode of being, a mode of doing, and a mode of becoming as the dialectical relationship between being and doing. And what we're going to do today is we will explore these three domains, these three modes from an existential perspective, because it's beautiful. It maps perfectly onto what existential philosophy is about, and we will get to a very deep interpretation of these three modes. And what I also find interesting to mention is that becoming is a dialectical process between being and doing. And so we can speak of a certain kind of individuation process. It's an unfolding, it's a developmental unfolding of who we are, or a developmental unfolding of who we become when we're living a meaningful life. And it's worth mentioning that even though he speaks about a sort of individuation process, his background, he's not coming from a background of Carl Jung. So he doesn't speak about the collective unconscious and the unconscious in general. It's not where he's coming from. And so the individuation process that he's talking about as the individuation process that existential philosophy is talking about is not about it's not about the shape-shifting of the self through making the unconscious conscious, but it is about the shape-shifting of the self, the development of the self by remembering the forgotten. And that which is forgotten is the ultimate mystery of being itself. And like I said in one of the first lectures about this, about the integral existentialism called Reconnecting to Being, what I said there is that the hypothesis of the integral existentialism is that the way through the meaning crisis is to reconnect to being. That a meaningful life takes place once a human being realizes the absolute mystery that is going on here, which is being itself. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, in this clip that I showed you just a little snippet of, he continues describing in more detail what these three modes are. And so I will give you a short summary of what he says in this clip. So the mode of being, he says, is taking in and appreciating the beauty of life that is now. It's a mode that is in the moment and that is largely about being with what is. It's fundamentally grounded in the meaningfulness of experience. When I'm having this experience, I'm not actually asking what the meaning of life is. I'm actually full of it. The mode of doing. Doing is adding to the beauty of life. You're going to produce some art. I'm going to produce some technology. I'm going to do some science that will end up leading to better insights or other people's ability to appreciate the beauty of life more because they understand the beauty of life more, or to protect the beauty of life. That's adding to or being in service of the beauty of life through our doing. And then the third one, the mode of becoming. Becoming is getting better at both of those, being able to deepen our being, which is to be able to take in the beauty of life more profoundly, being more moved by it, being more touched by it. Anything increasing our capacity with doing to add to the beauty of life more. And so again, note that this is a sort of dialectical process where becoming is going back and forth between being and doing. So again, now we are going to take an existential perspective on these three modes. First, the mode of being. The mode of being is what I will interpret in the framework of the integral existentialism as the consciousness of being. As I alluded earlier, that the existential philosophy, and I'm speaking in resonance with Karl Jaspers here, is about elevating into consciousness, or elevating into clarity the consciousness of being. It is where we're trying to think through what it means to be human, ending up with a sense of not knowing, because what it means to be human is partly to exist, and to exist is beyond every conceptualization. It's beyond any explanation. And so what we are ending up with when we're trying to think through what it means to be human is that we're ending up with a sense of wonder. What we're ending up is a sense of it's what you are is an unfathomable wonder, because you're realizing that existence or being is not just out there in the universe, but that you are actually part of being, that being is actually what is happening here in the here and now. And this is where your self-presence is growing into the eternal presence, or merging with the eternal presence. And the mode of being, in a way, is a very simple insight. It's just the realization that being exists. It's just a realization that what is actually happening here is an ultimate mystery, and that you are part of it. That you are part of it by virtue of your existence. Now, it's a very simple insight, but what makes this so rich is when this simple insight meets the richness of what it means to be human. When we're thinking through what it means to be human, we're distancing ourselves from our own existence. We are distancing from ourselves by contextualizing what it means to be human in its ultimate horizon, which is that we are distancing ourselves more and more up to the point where we are realizing that whatever is happening here, whatever is appearing here, whatever is existing, is an appearance of the absolute, is an appearance of being itself. And so this sense of awe that we can experience once we are realizing that what is actually happening here is the manifestation of being, an unfathomable wonder, and the ultimate mystery. This awe that we can experience for being can pervade our self and world experiences, where we are realizing that it's not the case that we as human beings are with one foot in nothingness holding us in being, but that what is actually happening here is that we are just finding ourselves in existence. And the awe that we are experiencing once we're having the first inklings of absolute consciousness, once we're having the first inklings of the grandness that being as such is, this awe can pervade your self-experience by realizing that you are a manifestation of it. And all of a sudden you become awe-inspiring to yourself. All of a sudden the world that you are seeing in front of your eyes becomes awe-inspiring to yourself, because you're realizing it, like the empirical world in front of you has become transparent as being a manifestation of the ultimate mystery. And so we started by thinking through what it means to be human, but the way we're thinking about what it means to be human feeds back into the way we are experiencing our humanness. And so we are transforming our humanness by transforming the way we're thinking about what it means to be human. And again, this is where we are distancing ourselves from ourselves to the maximum degree. And then there's this existential decision that we are making, is that existential philosophy, and we, insofar as we are thinking through what it means to be us in the framework of existential philosophy, we are not seeking ego dissolution. We are not rushing towards ego dissolution. But this mode of being will lead us towards what Daniel Schmachtenberger then calls the mode of doing. But what is actually also happening is that this simple insight of being will transform the way we are. It will shapeshift who we are. It will transform our identity. And the decision that we're making is, when we're distancing ourselves from ourselves, is that we are choosing, say, to go back into the world. And this is fundamentally structured by realizing that we are a manifestation of being, and that our lives is a manifestation of being, and that who we can be is only what we can be in our situation. So we are distancing ourselves, and now we can go into ego dissolution and just disappear in a sense. Or we are realizing or accepting that the empirical world that we are finding ourselves in is the only sphere where we can realize who we are. We can realize who we are as an identity, who we are as an ego. And this is where we're making the decision to re-identify with a certain action. And this is how we enter the mode of doing. Integral existentialism will take a look on the mode of doing by interpreting it from the standpoint or from the perspective of Bill Plotkin. From once we have distanced ourselves and then re-entered the world, re-identified with some path in the world, in our lives, by virtue of the fact that we are realizing that our lives also is a manifestation of the ultimate mystery, and by shifting our perspective such that our lives is not only one problem after the other to be solved, but that our life is a mystery to be lived. And in that spirit, we are re-identifying with a certain path, with a certain doing, as Daniel Schmachtenberger is calling it. And now there are certain biases in the classical existential philosophy, which is, for example, a very individualistic point of view. And we are trying to transcend that. We're trying to find relational accounts of this re-identification with our lives and with a certain path in the world. And we are calling this finding your place in the world. It's not about authenticity in the sense of being an encapsulated subject, and the only thing that makes me authentic is a certain kind of relationship that I'm having with myself, with relating to my inner world. It's not about just my inner world and just about my subjectivity, but it is about a truthful and existentially grounded relationship that I'm taking with my surroundings, with other people, and with the world, and with the more than human world. And again, everyone who knows Bill Plotkin will hear his influence on that. Now, Bill Plotkin interprets the word soul even in this relational account of finding your place. For him, the essence of a thing is made up by all the relationships that thing is in with all the other things in the world. And so finding your place once you have distanced yourself from the world, and once you have become transformed by the realization that being exists and that you are a manifestation of being, is stepping into a certain resonance with the world. And this can be based upon, for example, a radical, existentially grounded self-acceptance, where, like I said earlier, the awe that we are experiencing for the world pervades your self-experience such that you're realizing yourself as a manifestation of being, and that you can all of a sudden, the awe that you're experiencing for being is what you're experiencing for your own existence. And that by doing that, you can, for the first time at least, refrain from a judgment, to hold back a certain judgment of who you are. And so this radical acceptance, once you accept yourself as a living and breathing mystery, can then give you a certain kind of authenticity by inhabiting a certain place in the world where you are finding the deepest resonance, and where you're finding that you have a certain gift to share with the world. And that doesn't mean, like, the problem with saying things like this, it sounds like the self-optimization mania and the self-actualization mania that we are exaggerating over in our society, all this meritocracy bullshit. And that like what I'm saying is it's not about having a spectacular career or something like that, but it's about realizing yourself and your situation as a manifestation of the ultimate mystery, learning to trust it, learning to surrender to it, and making the world your ultimate concern, and elevating into clarity the intuition that we have a gift to share with the world, and that this is a sort of doing, like Daniel Schmachtenberger says, that is deepening your experience of the world and yourself as the ultimate mystery. Now, I want to go back to what Daniel Schmachtenberger says about the mode of doing, because this is important. He says that I want moments absorbed in the sunset where I'm not thinking about what to do next. And the fullness of that can make it to where my doing doesn't come from what's in it for me, because I feel overwhelmingly full already. And then it's like, how can I make life better for other people that don't have as much opportunity I had? And this fullness, as Daniel Schmachtenberger says, that we are finding in the consciousness of being, and that we are finding in the realization that we as human beings, or that you in your personal existence are a manifestation of being, and the radical self-acceptance that we can find by relating to ourselves as a mystery, as a breathing and living mystery. What can happen then is that we are kind of get over ourselves, that we are stop to being so harsh about ourselves, that we stop being so harsh with ourselves with regards to the perceived inadequacies that we can have. And this contentment, this enchantment that we experience in our everyday life. I mean, I know I'm speaking from a lucky perspective and also from a privileged perspective, but still the enchantment that we can experience once we're realizing that what is actually happening here is a manifestation of the ultimate mystery. We can find a sort of contentment that really helps us to get over ourselves, to find or to transcend an egocentric identity structure towards an ecocentric and then cosmocentric identity structure, where it's not about us, but it's about sharing our gift with the world. And this is so beautiful. This is what I mean, that when I say that Daniel Schmachtenberger's sense-making is in service of a certain kind of meaning-making, is where you're realizing that this guy is beyond himself. Like, he's really concerned with the world. It's not about what is in it for him. And so this is beautiful. So let's come to the last point here, the mode of becoming. Again, I will interpret this as an existential individuation process. And let me just very briefly go back to Karl Jaspers, my biggest influence, because I think it's so beautiful. What he says is that you can only understand what philosophy is by living in philosophy. It's impossible to understand what philosophy is by having a conceptual understanding of it. And this is what I said, that when we're thinking through what it means to be human, we are restructuring our experience of what it means to be human. When we're thinking about what it means to be human, we are realizing the ultimate mystery that is going on here, and all of a sudden our sense of humanness, our self and world experience is grounded in mystery consciousness. We are restructuring the way we are experiencing ourselves and the world. Now, the existential individuation process unfolds from the tension between states of consciousness and stages of consciousness. Sort of what Daniel Schmachtenberger means with the mode of being and the mode of doing, even though doing here is interpreted more broadly, because it's the tension between the state of consciousness, meaning the consciousness of being, the realization of the ultimate mystery, and then doing insofar as this simple, static insight meets the richness and the temporal existence that we have, or that we are finding ourselves in as embodied beings. And so the tension between the state of consciousness, meaning a certain realization of being, and the stage of consciousness, meaning being shapeshifted, creating an identity based upon the realization that who we are is an ultimate mystery. And and this is what we are going to speak about in the next weeks, in more detail, certainly at some point, is about the existential individuation process, again, that is unfolding in the tension between a state of consciousness that can lead to a certain disidentification with the way you are inhabiting the world, your place in the world, and then you are forming a new identity, a new way of relating to the world and relating to yourself, relating to other people, that was initiated by achieving or experience a certain kind of depth in the mode of being. And there's a lot of very interesting things to say about this. And so I will close with that for today.